Imagine sitting on a beach with your friends, laughing, relaxing, and realizing you're the only one still tied to a 9 to 5. Everyone else is talking about freedom, about building businesses, about making money while they sleep. And you? You're stuck trading time for money. That's exactly where Harry found himself a few months ago. And what happened next might just change the way you think about passive income forever. You know, a few months back, a bunch of us decided to escape the daily grind and head off on a little holiday together. Just a handful of good friends, the kind you can talk about anything with. 2 of us were already running our own businesses, full-time entrepreneurs. Another friend had a day job, but also a solid side hustle. And then, there was Harry, the only one still fully chained to his corporate job. And over the course of that trip, as the conversations unfolded, something inside him shifted. Until one evening, sitting around, drink in hand, he finally said it. Man, I really want to build my own streams of passive income. And there it was, honest and simple. A dream so many of us share but rarely say out loud. Now, if you're listening to this and you've ever had that quiet voice in your head whisper the same thing, wanting more freedom, more control, more choices, then you're in good company. Because at the heart of it, Harry wasn't really chasing money for the sake of money. It wasn't about getting rich and buying fancy things. It was about something much deeper, something universal. It was about freedom. Freedom to work when he wanted, where he wanted. Freedom to spend more time doing the things he loved, with the people he cared about. Freedom to wake up each morning and know that his day belonged entirely to him. And honestly, that dream is completely valid. It's a dream worth chasing. But of course, dreaming about passive income is one thing. Actually building it, that's where the real adventure begins. And before you can start building, you have to understand what passive income truly means. Because as much as we'd all love to earn money without lifting a finger, the reality is a little more complicated. See, when most people say they want passive income, what they actually mean isn't, I want money for doing absolutely nothing. We all know deep down that those Instagram fantasies of sipping cocktails on a beach while money magically appears in our bank account, well, they're just that, fantasies. What people are really chasing is this: income that isn't tied directly to the hours they work. The dream is simple. Do the work once and let the rewards continue to flow, even while you're sleeping, traveling, or spending time with loved ones. Take, for example, something like writing a book. When you write a book, you pour your time, energy, and creativity into it, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. But once it's out there in the world, that book can sell copies day and night without you having to constantly show up and work for each sale. That's the magic. You've built something that generates value and income, even when you're not actively involved. And that's exactly what had me so hooked on the idea of passive income ever since I was a teenager. I spent years trying, failing, learning, and eventually figuring it out, to the point where I could step away from a traditional career and build my own thing full-time. So when Harry said he wanted passive income, the first question I threw back at him was simple. Why? Not because I didn't believe him, but because understanding your why, your real reason, matters more than anything else. After a little back and forth, some thinking, and a few laughs, Harry boiled it all down to a single word: freedom. It wasn't that he hated his job. In fact, he was pretty comfortable where he was. But the thought of being chained to a desk, tied to someone else's schedule, following orders instead of chasing passions, that's what gnawed at him. He didn't want to stop working altogether. He loved the idea of still being productive, still building things, still creating value, but doing it on his terms. Freedom to travel more, maybe work part-time, maybe write, maybe explore passions he hadn't even discovered yet. And honestly, that's one of the purest, most powerful reasons to chase passive income. Not for the Lambos or the mansions, but for the simple, beautiful ability to wake up and choose how you live your life. And once Harry was clear on his why, we could finally start getting serious about the how. Because dreaming about freedom is one thing, but building it? That's where things start to get really interesting. Now that Harry knew why he wanted passive income, it was time to look at how he might actually build it. And to explain it, I used one of my favorite mental models, a simple but powerful metaphor. Imagine your career, your work life, as a ship. At the start of your journey, you have two main options. You can be a crew member on someone else's ship, or you can build and captain your own. When you're working a regular job, whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, a consultant, or anything else, you're part of someone else's ship. You're contributing your time and skills to help that ship sail toward its destination. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's where almost everyone begins. It's how we learn the basics, how we build experience, and how we earn a steady paycheck. Harry, as a lawyer working for a big firm, was a perfect example. He was a highly skilled crew member on a very large, very profitable ship. The thing is, when you're a crew member, you're mainly trading time for money. You show up, you do your hours, you get paid. And the moment you stop working, the income stops too. That's the opposite of passive income. To build real streams of passive income, the kind that gives you true freedom, you usually need to own the ship. You need to be the one building it, steering it, and setting the destination. Now, I get it. The word business or entrepreneurship can sound intimidating, even exhausting. It feels heavy, complicated, risky. So instead of thinking about it as starting a big, scary business, think of it more playfully. Think of it like crafting your own little ship. At first, it might just be a small raft, something simple that floats. Maybe it's a side hustle, a small freelance gig, a digital product. But little by little, you can build it into a vessel strong enough to carry you wherever you want to go. Of course, building your own ship is harder. There are dragons along the way, obstacles, fears, setbacks. Some of those dragons are external, things like lack of money, lack of time, but most of them, they're inside your own head. The doubts, the excuses, the voice that says, "Who am I to do this?" Still, if you want real freedom, sooner or later, you have to move from being a crew member on someone else's ship to becoming the captain of your own. And as I explained this to Harry, I could see the gears turning in his mind. He realized staying a crew member could definitely earn him a good living, maybe even let him invest enough over decades to eventually reach freedom. But building his own ship, that could get him there faster and on his own terms. And so, the next big question became, which path would he choose? So, once Harry started seeing the difference between working on someone else's ship and building his own, it was time to get practical. Because when it comes to creating passive income, there are really two main roads you can take. The first path is slower, safer, and a lot more predictable. The second path is faster, riskier, and a lot more demanding. Let's start with the first one, the slow and steady route, investing. When you work a full-time job, you're essentially trading your time for a paycheck. Now, if you live below your means, meaning you spend less than you earn, you can save the difference. And with that saved money, you can start investing. Savings accounts are the simplest way to start. You put your money in, the bank uses it to do whatever banks do, and they give you a tiny bit of interest back. It's passive, sure, but let's be real, the returns are laughable. That's where investing in the stock market comes in. Instead of lending your money to a bank, you lend it to big businesses by buying shares. Companies like Apple, Amazon, Google. Over the past few decades, the stock market, especially broad indexes like the S&P 500, has grown at an average of about 7% per year after adjusting for inflation. Not bad, right? Let's say you put $100 into the S&P 500. On average, after a year, you'd expect to have about $107. You've made $7 without lifting a finger. That's passive income. Now, there's a rule in finance called the 4% rule. It's kind of like the golden number for retirement planning. It says you can safely withdraw about 4% of your investment portfolio every year without running out of money. So, if Harry wanted £10,000 a month, that's £120,000 a year, he would need about £3 million invested. £3 million. Not exactly pocket change, especially if you're trying to build that just by saving a bit from your salary each month. Realistically, it would take Harry decades to reach that level through pure saving and investing. Promotions, raises, living frugally, all of that would help. But still, we're talking years and years before he'd have true financial freedom. This first path is what a lot of people call get rich slow. And honestly, it works. It's stable, it's relatively safe, and it's available to almost anyone willing to be patient and disciplined. But Harry wasn't exactly thrilled by the idea of waiting 20 years to live life on his own terms. So naturally, the conversation turned to the second path, the faster, more exciting, and yes, slightly scarier, way to build passive income. Building his own ship, starting something of his own, becoming an entrepreneur. And that, of course, would take us into a whole different world, a world of creativity, risk, and the potential for freedom on a much faster timeline, if he could pull it off. So, with the slow and steady investment path laid out and looking just a little too slow for Harry's taste, it was time to talk about the second option, building your own ship. This is the path of entrepreneurship, the path where you don't just lend your time or your money to someone else's dream, you build your own. Now, on the surface, it sounds amazing. Be your own boss, set your own hours, create something that makes money even while you sleep. But make no mistake, the waters on this route are rougher, because this is where the dragons live. And not just the dragons of market competition, financial risk, or business strategy, but the dragons inside your own mind. Thoughts like, I don't have a good idea. I'm not ready. What if I fail? I don't have the skills. Sound familiar? Because honestly, that's where most people get stuck. Not because they can't succeed, but because the fear of taking that first step, of leaving the safety of the crew and stepping onto a tiny, shaky raft of their own making, feels overwhelming. And the statistics don't exactly help either. Most new businesses don't succeed. It's risky, it's uncertain, and the timeline to real results can feel painfully slow in the beginning. But here's the thing, and it's important. Most of the barriers holding people back aren't external. They're internal. It's not the market. It's not the lack of money. It's not even a lack of opportunity. It's the voice inside that says, not me, not yet. And honestly, that's the dragon that needs slaying first. Now, when I asked Harry about it, he admitted he was scared. Not of hard work. He was no stranger to putting in the hours, but scared of picking the wrong idea, scared of wasting time, scared of looking foolish. Totally normal. We've all been there, so I told him something simple. You don't need the perfect idea, you just need a good enough one to get started. Because business ideas aren't found sitting on a mountaintop waiting for divine inspiration. They're found in action, in messy, imperfect, trial and error action. And that's when I introduced him to one of the simplest, most powerful exercises I know for getting started. An exercise called the Now Not How Challenge. Because if you're serious about building your own ship, about carving your own path to freedom, the most important thing you can do is take one small step forward, not tomorrow, not next week. Now, so here's the thing about starting your own ship. It's not about having every single detail figured out. It's about getting moving. And that's why the Now Not How challenge is so powerful. The idea is incredibly simple, and yet it breaks through one of the biggest barriers people face when starting something new. Instead of worrying endlessly about how you'll build a business, you take action now. Here's how it works. You grab your phone, open your messages, and text someone you trust, someone who knows you well. And you send them a message that says something like, Hey Name, I'm thinking about starting a business, but I'm stuck on ideas. Since you know me pretty well, I was wondering, what kind of business do you think I'd be good at? That's it. One tiny action. It sounds almost too simple, right? But that's the point. Because the moment you send that message, something shifts inside you. You move from passively thinking about starting to actively doing something about it. And action builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence builds results. Now, when I suggested this to Harry, I could see the hesitation on his face. That little voice popped up, the one we all know, whispering things like, Oh, they're busy. It's a silly question. I don't want to bother them. But that voice is exactly the dragon you have to defeat. Because if sending a single text feels uncomfortable, imagine how uncomfortable it'll be to pitch a product, launch a service, ask for a sale. Taking tiny steps now conditions you to be brave later. And here's the beauty of it. Even if the person doesn't have a brilliant business idea for you, just asking for their input puts you in a different mindset. You're no longer a passive dreamer. You're an active builder. And that, my friends, is where everything starts to change. Because once you take that tiny action, it's no longer about someday, it's about today. It's no longer a dream floating in the distance, it's a journey you've already begun. And if you're listening to this right now, I'm going to challenge you too. Pause this podcast, pick someone you trust, and send that message right now. You never know, It might just be the spark that lights up everything that comes next. Alright, so after explaining the now, not how challenge and nudging Harry to start moving, we shifted gears. It was time to actually start brainstorming what his business could look like. Because here's the thing, you don't need $1 million idea to start, you just need something that fits you, your interests, your skills, your community, and what people might actually pay for. So we grabbed some paper and began sketching it out with 4 simple questions. What do you enjoy? What are you good at? What's useful to others? And what might people actually pay money for? Now, Harry didn't have an immediate answer. Most people don't. But after a little soul-searching, a few laughs, and some honest thinking, a pattern started to emerge. First, what did Harry enjoy? Writing. He loved writing. Always had. It relaxed him. It challenged him. It made him feel creative. Next, what was he naturally good at? Well, interestingly enough, emotional intelligence. He had this ability to read people, to sense what was going on beneath the surface, especially in professional settings, where emotions often get buried under layers of formality. And working in law, where emotional intelligence is strangely rare, made him realize just how valuable that skill really was. Third, would emotional intelligence be useful to others? Absolutely. Clients, judges, juries, bosses, coworkers. Being able to understand and respond to people's emotions is a superpower in almost any profession. And finally, would people pay for it? Well, corporate law firms spend absurd amounts of money every year on professional development workshops, leadership skills, communication, emotional intelligence. And let's be honest, men in particular could use a bit more emotional intelligence both professionally and personally. Suddenly, we saw it. The outline of an idea that checked every box. Harry could create content, articles, maybe videos, maybe a newsletter, all about emotional intelligence for professional men, helping lawyers, consultants, managers, men in high-pressure careers develop the kind of emotional skills that not only make them better at their jobs, but better at life. And even better, we could already imagine a path to monetization, corporate workshops, online courses, coaching programs, maybe even a book someday. The more we talked about it, the more Harry's eyes lit up. Because this wasn't some random idea out of a hat. It was rooted in who he already was, what he already loved, and what the world actually needed. Of course, ideas are just the beginning. Having a good idea is like spotting a distant island on the horizon. You still have to build the boat, set sail, and survive the storms to actually get there. But for the first time that holiday, Harry could see it. A ship he could build, a path he could walk, freedom he could create for himself. And that, right there, was a huge step forward. Now that Harry had his idea, the next big question was how he should bring it to life. Because even with a great idea, there are still decisions to make about what kind of business you want to build. And for Harry, it boiled down to 2 main paths: build an audience first, or offer a service right away. Each path had its own pros and cons, and choosing the right one would shape everything that came next. So, let's break it down. The first option was building an audience. This would mean creating free content, posts, articles, maybe even videos, around emotional intelligence for professional men. Sharing ideas, teaching concepts, telling stories. The goal? To slowly, steadily attract people who cared about the topic. To build a group of readers, followers, subscribers, an audience that knew him, liked him, and trusted him. Now, the beautiful thing about building an audience is that it's incredibly low cost. Anyone can start today. Open a LinkedIn account, a Substack newsletter, maybe even a Twitter profile. No special equipment, no startup capital. Just ideas, words, and consistency. But, and this is a big but, it takes time. Audience building is what's known as a J-curve business, meaning in the beginning, you put in a lot of time and effort and see very little reward. You write posts that get no likes. You publish newsletters that barely anyone reads. You show up week after week, wondering if anyone's even listening. For months, maybe even years, it feels like you're shouting into the void. And only later, once you've built enough trust and attention, can you monetize through things like books, courses, sponsorships, or services. In short, building an audience is slow to start, but massively powerful once it clicks. The second option was offering a service straight away. Instead of spending months creating free content, Harry could jump directly to selling something valuable, like corporate workshops on emotional intelligence. And the best part? companies are willing to pay serious money for these kinds of workshops. We're talking thousands of pounds for a single session. In fact, when I've done similar workshops, companies have offered anywhere from £2,000 to £50,000, depending on the size and scope. Selling a service like this has two huge advantages. First, you can make money much faster than building an audience. Second, you don't need thousands of customers. You just need a few right clients. But, again, there's a trade-off. Selling a service means learning to sell. You have to pitch yourself. You have to network. You have to convince HR managers and corporate decision makers that you're worth paying. And if you're not used to selling, if you find the idea of putting yourself out there terrifying, it can be a pretty steep learning curve. So there we were. Harry had two clear roads ahead. 1. Build an audience. Slow, steady, lots of upfront work. Big payoff later. 2. Offer a service. Faster money, but high-pressure sales and less scalability at the start. And it really came down to Harry's personality, his comfort level, his appetite for risk and rejection. After a long, thoughtful conversation and a bit of soul-searching, Harry made his choice. He decided to go the audience-building route. He loved writing. He loved the idea of creating value up front without asking people for money right away. And honestly, he wasn't too keen on cold pitching law firms and executives just yet. So he set his sights on creating content. Thoughtful, practical posts about emotional intelligence for professional men. Starting small, starting simple, starting now. The plan was set. The course was charted. Harry was ready to sail, or so it seemed. At this point, Harry had everything he needed to succeed. He had a clear why, freedom. He had a solid idea, emotional intelligence for professional men. And he had a chosen path, building an audience through writing. Honestly, he was better prepared than 90% of people who dream about passive income but never even get this far. So he made a commitment. He promised he would post every week on LinkedIn. One thoughtful, valuable post every single week. Simple, consistent, steady. At first, things looked good. Harry published his first post, and it was great. Well-written, authentic, full of insights. We all celebrated in our group chat, cheering him on. It felt like the ship was finally leaving the harbor. But then, a week went by. No post. Another week. Still nothing. We checked in with him. He said life got busy. Fair enough. Happens to everyone. The next week, he posted again, but then fell silent for another 2 weeks. Slowly, the pattern became clear. Good intentions, but no real momentum. 2 months later, we asked how the writing was going, and Harry's answer? Ah, man, I just didn't have the time. Now here's the truth, and it's a hard one. When people say they don't have the time, what they usually mean is, it wasn't a priority. Because let's be honest, Harry didn't have kids. He wasn't caring for sick relatives. He wasn't working 2 jobs. He had time, but like so many people, he struggled with the real enemy. Consistency without immediate rewards. See, building passive income, whether it's through investing, entrepreneurship, or audience building, means putting in effort now without seeing results for a long time. And that's one of the hardest things a human being can do, because our brains crave instant feedback, instant rewards, instant proof that what we're doing is working. When you're working on a J-curve business, like building an audience, the beginning feels like shouting into a void. You post and no one likes it. You write and no one reads it. You show up and it feels like no one cares. And if you're not ready for that, if you don't find a way to enjoy the process itself, it becomes painfully easy to quit. Most people don't fail because their ideas were bad. They fail because they couldn't stay consistent long enough for their ideas to work. Harry's story is not unusual. In fact, it's the story of most people who set out to build something meaningful. And it's why the real secret to passive income isn't finding the perfect idea, or the perfect market, or the perfect strategy. It's finding a way to show up over and over again, even when no one's watching, even when no one's clapping, even when it feels like nothing's working. That's the true dragon you have to slay. Not the market, not the competition, but your own doubts, your own impatience, your own fear of looking foolish. And if you can slay that dragon, you can build almost anything you want. So why is building passive income so hard? It's not because the strategies don't work. It's not because the opportunities aren't real. It's because the journey demands something that's rare, extraordinary consistency in the face of zero immediate reward. See, passive income is about creating assets that continue to create value even when you're not actively working. Assets like content, capital, or code. Each of these, whether it's a book, a YouTube channel, a rental property, an app, a stock portfolio, shares one thing in common. They all require you to work incredibly hard upfront for a long time, often without getting paid at all. And then, after what feels like an eternity, they finally start paying you back. It's like pushing a giant, heavy flywheel. At first, every push feels useless. The wheel barely moves. You're exhausted, frustrated, doubting yourself. But if you keep pushing, if you stay consistent, eventually the wheel starts to turn faster and faster. And once it's spinning, it takes far less effort to keep it going. That's passive income. That's freedom. But you have to survive the early phase where it feels like you're going nowhere. And the biggest mistake people make, they quit pushing too soon. They expect to see results in weeks, maybe months. But real success often takes years. The truth is, extraordinary results demand extraordinary effort, not once, not in bursts, but day after day, week after week, year after year. And here's the good news. It gets easier if you find a way to love the process itself. If you enjoy writing, you'll write even when no one's reading. If you enjoy creating videos, you'll film even when no one's watching. If you enjoy solving problems, you'll build even when no one's buying. Because when you love the craft, the work becomes the reward. And if you can fall in love with the process, you'll naturally outlast almost everyone else. Harry's story didn't end with a book deal or a viral LinkedIn post or a six-figure business, at least not yet. But it taught him and reminded me of something powerful. Building freedom isn't just about the right strategy. It's about building the right habits, the right mindset, and the right relationship with the work itself. It's about becoming the kind of person who keeps pushing the flywheel even when it looks like nothing's happening. Because one day, if you stay consistent, that wheel will start to spin, and when it does, your whole life changes. So here's where we land. If you're dreaming about passive income, about freedom, about waking up each day with full control over your time and energy, know this. It's not going to happen by accident. It's not going to happen overnight. And it's not going to happen just because you want it really badly. It happens when you commit, not just once, but again and again, to taking small steps even when they feel invisible. It happens when you understand that building your freedom will often look a lot like hard work at first. It will test your patience. It will test your discipline. It will test how much you really want the life you say you want. And if you can stick with it, if you can show up consistently without immediate applause, without instant rewards, you'll be shocked at what you can create. The real danger in life isn't failing at your first idea. It's living a life that reads like a resume instead of an adventure. A life full of bullet points and safe choices and polite nods, but no risks, no stories, no real, wild, joyful freedom. So if there's something stirring inside you right now, a tiny spark of inspiration, a little flicker of motivation, don't let it fade. Send that message. Write that first post. Make that first call. Take that first step. You don't need to know the whole path yet. You just need to move. Because once you do, you stop being a passenger on someone else's ship. You start building your own. And trust me, no matter how scary it feels at first, setting sail on your own ship, even a small, messy, wobbly one, beats standing on the shore wondering what if for the rest of your life. So choose the adventure, not the resume, and I'll see you out there.
Thank you for listening. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the podcast is to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every bit of support helps us keep creating content that actually matters. See you in the next one.